So now we set up our new project. I'm just going to start Mysql and start Railo. Alright, so we left off at FW1, Framework 1 default layout, and passing basic parameters from using the RC. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open Mysql Workbench, and inside here, go to your local host that we set up in the last tutorial. You can delete this drop, and then we're going to create a new, we're just going to call it new project. Default collation, put UTF-8. So now we just made a new database called new project. Inside here, we're going to create a table. I'm just going to call it, we'll say users. Okay, the table name is users, and ID will be the first column, type of integer, auto increment, and then name and pass. Alright, we're just going to leave those as varchars 45. Hit apply, and then close. So now we see here we have a new table named users. If we select the rows, we just have an empty table, right? The fields are ID, which is the primary key, name and password, which are both chars. First, we will add that to our Railo databases. So go back to your Railo administrator, which is at Railo-context/admin index. Once you're there, just hit the password. And then go to services, data source. Inside data source, we're going to create a new data source with the name that we just created of the database, new project, and type, select MySQL, create, host server, local hosts, that's fine, database is new project, the port, that's fine, time zone, username and password, for right now I'm just going to leave it as root with no password. Since we're just running this as a demo on our local. And then pretty much everything else you could leave the same, just hit create. So now here you see that we've created a data source that our Railo instance can hook into, right? Named new project. That's all for the administrator side. Then I'm going to open my new project in Coda. I'm going to go to my application.cfc, and we're going to change this from CF script. We're just going to use tags. Alright, so basically the main thing that to note on all these lines is the name of the project is new project. We're enabling ORM. We're setting the CFC location to ORM hyphen your project name, and then that just to make sure we have that created. I'm going to go to my project folder, and then inside here I'm just going to create a folder that says ORM hyphen our project name. We can just leave that like that for now. This data source is the name of your database that we just created called new project, and that's pretty much the main important ones from here. So I'm going to save that as my application CFC, and then just hit / reload equals true to reload your application. Start time. Where is this? I think we still have that in the views, main, default. Okay, I'm going to delete all these default options that are brought in here. I'm just going to leave CF output body. Well, I'll just leave the header. I'll just change the header to something else. Alright, so now we are all set up to connect to our database. The main thing I will do for now is we're gonna use one CFC we're gonna call handler, and that's basically gonna handle the majority of our operations. We're gonna go to controllers, and we're gonna actually just duplicate this main CFC and rename it to handler. And what I'm going to do is really quick, instead of having to write this init function, I'm going to create a new component named init.cfc. And then inside here I'm just going to paste that init function. Right, so now in our main we can just say cf component extends equals init, and in our handler we can do the same, so we don't have to write that init function ever. So handler CFC. Now that we have our handler CFC set up, this is going to handle the actual request for pulling data or setting data from the database that we just set up. Before we get into this handler CFC, we're going to do one last thing on the ORM new project. We're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it new, the field that we named was users. I'm not sure if it was with an S or not. Let me just check that real quick. Okay, so it was users with an S. So I'll call it users.cfc. Inside users.cfc, it's basically mapping out what your table fields are. So that's how ORM loads them. That's how we're going to do our entity loads. So once you create a new table, and you in this case users, we're just going to make a users.cfc and then map out all those IDs. So you can put cf component persistent equals true, table equals users. Inside here we're going to define a cf property, name equals ID, column equals ID, and generator equals native. Cf property name equals name, and cf property name equals pass. So what we're doing here is basically just mapping out the fields, right? Once we created this table, you're going to see this ID, name, and pass, right? The only thing special about this one is that it's the primary key. So basically, if you're querying this database and you're trying to find any of these values, you're going to use this one mainly to do your queries on. So that's why that first line, cf property name ID, column equals ID, generator is native, that matches up with this. You're just going to always use that for now for your primary keys. And then the next ones you just have to define as a cf property name equals name, boom, and then name equals pass. And what this does essentially is it automatically generates getters and setters for these values to talk to your database. So here you're just going to hit save and just run this reload application again. and then we're going to go to our mappings again in our Cold Fusion our Railo administrator. Go to mappings on the left side, and we're going to add that mapping to the ORM new project. So whenever our application calls that, we know where to point it to. ORM and the project name, the resource. Again, a quick way to do it is you just go to your project and then the folder, and then just right click any of the files in there, get info, and then there's your whole path right there. Copy that and paste it into resource. Hit save. So now we have our ORM mapped out, and now we can actually start writing into our handler.cfc. Go back to your MySQL Workbench. In the table users, we're going to hit select rows, and then we're just going to fill out some random data. In this case, since our ID is auto increment, the AI that we selected here, that means we don't have to fill it out. When we're adding a new entry, it's automatically going to generate one for us. So we're just going to put name and pass, and then we're going to hit apply. So it saves it to the database. So just add a few more. Hit apply, so you have at least 3. And then we're going to go back to our handler.cfc and start our actual query. We're going to make a CF function. We're just going to say get users. Inside here, we're going to do a CF set. A CF argument. Name equals RC. And again, that RC is to pass variables to and from your CFC to your CFMs. And then we're going to actually make the query to hit the database table. We're going to do a CF set rc.userdata equals EntityLoad users. All right, so this so this EntityLoad is what's going to query your users table, right? This EntityLoad is saying whatever you find in this users table, you're going to bring it back and you're going to store it into rc.userdata. Instead of storing this into the RC, the user data entity load from the tables, we're just going to take off RC, and we're going to return that at the end of the function. CF return user data. So now whenever this function gets called, it's just going to return this variable that is whatever results that we're getting from the entity load, right? Since we want to have this available from our main CFC, we're going to go into main, and I had this as init. Rename that init to handler. So now we can call the functions from our handler CFC inside our main. In our main, we have a CF function named somePage, right? These are some results. This is being loaded again from click to visit some page. Once you go there, these are some results get printed, because in our view main some page, this rc.someResults comes from this. These are from some results. So now that we've set up a database, we set up a table, we created an ORM for that table, and we added the mapping for our ORM in our Railo administrator. From our handler CFC, our getUsers loads that table and stores it into a variable named username, and then this getUsers function just returns that user data. So to call this function from our main CFC function somePage, since we're extending handler now, we're going to call that function from back there into here. We're just going to put CF set user data equals get users. So this get users again is going to hit our handler CFC and run get users, run the function, and then return the user data back to main CFC. Now, one of the main functions to know in Cold Fusion or Railo is that if once we have this variable, to print out everything that's coming back, we're just going to use a dump, a cf dump, var equals quotation hashtag user data hashtag quotation. What this is going to do is just going to print everything that came back from that get users function, right? So now when we run this, if we click to visit some page, we're going to see this big, the dump of all the data inside there. If you click here, you can start that it's an array, right? What we're getting back is an array. Since our user table had more than one result, we're getting back all those results into an array. That array has a component which is users with these properties, right, that we defined in our ORM, our ID, our name, and our pass. When we defined our ORM, our user CFC, once we define this and we reload the application and it runs, it automatically generates the getters and setters for these variables. What that means is that it creates these public methods that are getters and setters, right? The same thing how we just did in the Java first tutorial. Set pass, set name, and get pass, get name. The naming convention is going to be the same exact way of your field names. So if your field name is name, then it's going to be get name, right? And so on. So we see that this first entry in the array has ID 1, name blitz, and pass anything, right? And these are the public methods available to us. The same exact way that this is the second component that coming back is number 2, someone, and else. And then again for the third is the same thing, right? If you go in the table just to check again, this is what is coming, right? All these data is coming back as those components inside that array. And this is how you print them out, the raw view of them, right? If we actually want to print, we'll go back to our main CFC inside some page function. If we actually want to print out our actual value of, let's say, blitz, then it's going to be a little bit different. Since we're coming back in an array, that user data is an array, we're going to go through the array by hitting user data bracket 1 bracket. So this takes us into here, right? Now that we're in here, we have access to these public methods. So we can call get name, which is what we want. We want to trace out blitz, and it's gonna bring out that value. So if we put user data 1 dot get name right there, that's the value that we want. So if we want to just put a cf set, rc dot print blitz, no, print first name equals user data 1 get name. Okay, so now this is getting stored into the RC as print first name variable. To display that in our page, we're going to go to our views, main sompage.cfm, and then right now we're outputting the results up here. We're just going to add a line break and then output the rc.printFirstName variable that we just created. So now when we refresh this, we're going to see these are some results, and then this is the output from the name. So right there, that's the main getting from the database all the way back to the page. If you hit reload on this page and you still see the big box, you still see our initial EntityLoad dump, just make sure you go back and make that's this reload equals true, right? Make sure you run that so it refreshes everything, and then click to visit some page, and now you should see the blitz here. So that's how to get one value, right? What if we go to our main, and instead of just saying user data equals get users and grabbing one value from the CFC, we wanted to print all the values in our sum page. Then what we can do is that now, since we want to pass the entire array to our sompage.cfm, we can set rc.userdata equals get users, right? So now we're going to be able to call this from our CFM. Once we go on our CFM, we're no longer going to have this variable, but we're going to have the rc.userdata. Okay, so how do you loop an array? Which this right now, if we try to print this, it's going to give us an error, since you just can't. It doesn't. Maybe I hit reload. There we go. It gives us this array. It can't cast complex object type array to a string, which is what we're trying to do. We're just trying to print it out as a string. If we want to loop through each of the components inside there and print out like blitz, someone, and another, then what we're going to have to do is going to do a CF loop. The syntax for that is this, right? The CF loop, the array, is going to equal that variable that we're setting in the main.cfc. Okay, that's going to be set into here. We're saying that array, we're going to loop through however many entities are inside there. We're going to set the index to, our index, just to say that this is basically like, you can name this whatever you want. This, what's going to happen is that every time this loop iterates, it's going to set this our index to the box. Remember each component. So in this case, it's going to have this whole component, and this whole component, and we're going to have access to those public methods, which is just the get name and get pass. So if here we just put hashtag our index dot get name parentheses hashtag, then we're going to get those values off every iteration inside this loop from our index. If I'm just going to put 2 line breaks, and then if we run this, we're going to see that this is some page, our results are, these are some results, that's ending here, and then it starts our loop, right? Blitz, someone, and another. That's getting it from the array now. So that's very useful if we're doing like if we have an input for or a select. If we have a select box, right, that we're trying to populate from querying a database, then we can just automatically drop the selects outside of the loop. And then our options, since we're already iterating through all the values that we need, we're just going to dynamically add them from this ourIndex.getName. Right? We're just going to need one option, and we're going to say we're going to place that into the actual value of our select box. Right? So now when we run this, I'm going to see blitz, someone, and another getting filled from our database. And then if you want to put the name, or rather the value, to actually do something, like once you select this, you have no, right now all the values are the same. They're all going to test. We could just set that to our index.getID. So now if we run this, you can't see it here, but if you go in the inspect element and then you open our select box, we're going to see option value 1, 2, and 3, since that's matching up to the IDs 1, 2, and 3. And again, this get ID and this get name are coming from these public methods that are automatically generated, get pass, get name, get ID, from when we define that user CFC.